is so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same. Never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Oh, I will never be the same. Will never be the same ever again.
God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to SDA Q&A.
I'm sorry, I have a technical problem. I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. We thought we'd fix that problem. I'll just welcome you. We've got our special guest, Dr. Don McAdams, and we've had problems with microphone. Can you... yes, try your phone again. Yes, this will work now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I just need to make sure my phone stays on.
It was the phone, yeah. Oh, has it got a locking thing on it?
Yeah, I have to figure out some way to keep it going.
Yes. Everyone, we apologize.
I'm not sure I know how to do that, but I'll just tap it every so often.
We've got this real hodgepodge way of today's program, everybody, and you've got no idea how many different little things we're doing to bring this program to you today. My guest is Dr. Don McAdams, and it's really great to have him on the program. And yeah, if your thing locks, that's going to be annoying, isn't it? But we'll see. We'll see if we can fix that somehow. Yeah, so we're going to just dive in, everybody, and continue as if there's no problems at all. And we just hope that we can avoid any audio issues. I don't know why this randomly happens, Don, and I hope you don't mind if I call you Don.
Yes.
1 in 10, 20 times we have something happens with the audio. So anyway, welcome everybody, and it's good to have you all here again today. I've been really looking forward to this interview. I'm not sure if you know much about SDA&A, but we've been around for 10 years, but quite intensely and intently for the last 5 years. And we kicked off season 2 during lockdown, and it was a real focus on Dr. Des Ford and Glacier View. And so during that season, what was going to be just 6 interviews turned into 86 interviews. Back then, I'd interviewed Des Ford, and he takes up 3 of those programs, I think. But everyone from Dr. Denny Fortin to John Butler, Ron Grable, George Knight, Larry Geraghty, Fritz Guy, Gil Valentine. It was just an incredible season with all these incredible academics and scholars and theologians. And I'd always wanted to interview you and Dr. Warren Trenchard and I've just forgotten his first name, Casebolt. Don Casebolt. But for some reason, I couldn't make it happen. And so here we are today. We're finally correcting that and have you on the program. I think I've watched and read everything you've ever written and produced online and whatnot. And so I'm a big fan. I said the same to Dr. Warren Trenchard last week. I just think the perspective and information that you guys have residing in your brains is just incredible. So I thought we'd begin today by chatting a bit about that program you did, I've seen online, where you're standing by some water. And I think you mentioned off air that even led to this book, Reclaiming the Prophet.
Yeah, there's a link.
There's a link. And I also just want to quickly share on the screen a book that I think came out before, well, it definitely came out before Reclaiming the Prophet. And it's your book, Ellen White and the Historians, which is a fantastic read. And I just want to encourage those who are watching to go and buy this book. I think it's available as a Kindle, on the Kindle as well.
Yeah, you can buy it. You can buy it on Amazon.com.
Yeah. So I just want to encourage people to go and buy that book. We will be talking about that book. We will be talking about other books. we're going to start with a little bit of a chat about this particular talk I mentioned, and then we're going to talk about the Adventist. Do you call them historian revisionists? And we're going to talk about a lot of the information that you uncovered before even Walter Ray with the white lie, and we're going to discuss this whole thing. I'm a pig in mud. I can't wait to have these stories unfold. And so, look, I'm going to just bring you a little bit closer to the screen there,
Yeah.
and get you to share with us briefly about yourself, and then take us to that day by the pond that
Okay.
led to so many
Well,
things.
let me say this is a long story. There are many little stories that weave together to make a big story, and it would take a day to tell the whole story, which I know would bore everybody, so we won't go down that path. Um, but let me just start by saying that I'm an old guy. I've been around, and I remember the 1950s. The wonderful world of Ellen White, George Knight calls it. I grew up in Tacoma Park. My father was a big shot at the General Conference. You know, he was secretary of the publishing department, which in those days was a really major department. He was one of the members of the board of trustees of the White Estate.
Wow.
And I went to school with the children of Arthur White. I played with them, went to the house once. And so, I mean, I felt really happy growing up being an Adventist. I must say that I love the Adventist church. It's like my second family. It was everything in my life. And I was delighted when I had the opportunity to go to Andrews University and teach history. Those were exciting times at Andrews. It was the late 60s and the 70s, and there was a lot of things popping. There's a
Yeah.
good story there about how that happened and why it happened.
Yeah.
Uh,
Tell us.
I met lots of interesting people. I met Warren Trenchard. By the way, Don Casebolt was one of my students. Um, and there was a lot of talk on campus about Ellen White because it turned out we were all having problems. The physicists, they had some problems. The chemists had some problems. The biologists had some problems. The historians had some problems. We come into these difficult issues, and there would be an Ellen White statement that would sort of shut the door, and yet we knew that the history wasn't right, or the science wasn't right, or the you know there was a problem, and it was an interesting time. I actually got into Ellen White studies by accident. Uh, I was trying to do some research to show that she had properly anticipated the causes of the English Reformation. I started off with a positive objective, and it turned out that I found in the process, I was studying the chapter in Great Controversy on what is called the early reformers. It's about Wycliffe and others. And it turns out that she copied, closely paraphrased. You can use different words. Some people say plagiarized. Uh, it was a close paraphrase and an abridgment in a sense, but the source was clearly Daubonnet. And so I decided to do a second sample to see if that was just a fluke. And I happened to pick the half chapter in Great Controversy on John Huss. And I'd already done a double column of arrangement to show the dependency on James A. Wiley's books, The History of Protestantism, a 3-volume work published in the 1870s and republished many times, very popular. And it was clear that Ellen White had taken that chapter directly from Wiley. And I sent, being a good Adventist, I sent copies to all of my upstream people, the department chair, the dean, the president, the chairman of the board, the White Estate, the book editors at the Review and Herald, and with a covering letter. And it said, basically, gentlemen, you have a problem. This is not my problem. I've just discovered it. It's something you need to deal with. And, I put it in your hands. The following summer, the summer of 1973, I was in Washington doing research on another topic. and was at the White Estate. And it was my friend Ron Graybill who drew my attention to the Huss manuscript. And the Huss manuscript provided Ellen White's handwritten rough draft of the very material I'd already studied. So I had column 1, Wiley, and column now 3, Great Controversy, and I put in the middle the handwritten rough draft and
Wow.
laid it all out in a paper. That
Yeah.
paper was sent to the White Estate in 1974. That was before Numbers Book.
Yeah.
That was before Walter Ray. But it was not in order to get access to this manuscript, I had to promise Elder White I would not publish or circulate. And I was a man of my word. I didn't publish, I didn't circulate. However, with permission of Arthur White, I did have several friends that critiqued my work on a pledge of for their eyes only. And it turns out one of them was not reliable, made photocopies, and the copies of my 1974 paper, which was entitled Ellen G. White and the Protestant Historians, circulated fairly widely in Adventist institutional centers. By the way, I know who the person was
I
because
remember you sharing once. Yeah, share how you knew. I thought it was
I had
brilliant.
put a different typographical error in each of the 4 copies that I had sent to 4 friends. So when I got a hold of the copy that was circulating, I knew who it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, I entered negotiations with the White Estate that went on till 1977 with a lot of intention of revisions. Arthur White wanted me to change a lot of stuff, not in the triple columns, but in my introduction to the issue. So that's enough on that. But the fact is, in 1975, I had accepted an offer to go to Southwestern Union College, as it was then called, as president. And I was there. And by the way, just an interesting aside, after the board had selected me, Elder Pearson, the General Conference president, called Ben Leach, the chairman of the board, then the president of the Southwestern Union, and said, "You have to undo this. You have to cancel this. You've made a bad mistake." But Ben stuck with me, and most of the conference presidents did. And I think I had a successful run as president at Southwestern. I was there for 9 years. One
Wow.
of my students was Dennis Nooner. I mean, he wasn't my student. I mean, wasn't teaching, but he was a student at the college, and I remember him well. He acted in one of the dramas that our English department put on. And Denny, I call him Denny, is from Arkansas. He's related to the Bainham family. His cousin Tim Bainham, who's a doctor, lives nearby, and they have a beautiful place on a lake in Arkansas. So in 1922, I published this book, Ellen White and the Historians, which is my paper. 50 years later, I published my paper with some additional chapters to put my paper in context. I can talk more about the book later, but
Yes.
I want to get to the story of the YouTube video, which, by the way, you can watch. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a
And
really I highly
it,
recommend it, by the way.
it's long and maybe boring, but
Oh, it's good.
Denny Nooner had invited me to come to his lake and make a presentation. And I promised him I would do that, but I really wanted to bring along with me some other historians who knew a lot more about it than I did, because I'm really not an Ellen White scholar. My specialty is 18th century British and European history, and my books are mostly on education policy. And there are people that know a lot more about Ellen White than me. And so I decided that I should get John Butler and Eric Anderson to come with me to the lake in Arkansas and be part of a really deep discussion. That was the plan. And it fell apart for reasons I won't get into. And so we had to cancel the event. But I promised Denny I would come back eventually later by myself and make a presentation, which I did. However, when that first event was canceled, Eric Anderson said, "Look, instead of just the 3 of us in Arkansas, let's meet at PUC and let's invite some others. Let's invite, in fact, sort of the main core of Ellen White scholars and spend a weekend looking at your book and thinking about Ellen White in a new way, in a more positive way. let's acknowledge the research of the last 50 years and ask ourselves, what is of value? And so we had this meeting on, interestingly enough, October 22, 2023. This book came out in 2022. So we met at PUC and we all made presentations. And after those presentations, Eric said, you know, everybody, I think we have a book here. I think we've got a book. And why don't you write on this, Don? And why don't you, Denny, write on this? And why don't you, John or George or Gil? And we all agreed to do that. And that is the book that became Reclaiming the Gospel. And as you know, the history of this book is that it was published by the Pacific Press.
Mm,
And then after some time, it was withdrawn from circulation.
very quickly.
And it is now being published by another publisher. So there
Oh,
will
good.
be in the next several months, I hope, who knows? I mean, you know, publishing books takes a while, a second edition of this book, which will be exactly like this one, except some of the typos will have been cleaned up.
Yeah.
I think the type will be larger. And I think we'll have endnotes at the end of each chapter instead of at the end of the book. So there'll be some minor improvements, but it will be exactly the same book.
Yeah.
And it will be available. But this book, I think, is more important than mine. And I recommend this book highly when it's available. Right now, it's not available, but it will be available in several months, I hope.
Yeah.
Certainly within
And
the
that's
next 6 months.
the book Reclaiming the Prophet.
Right. That's the book,
I
Reclaiming the Prophet.
you know, have had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of the people that have contributed to this.
Mhm.
And in conversations, I would often say, oh, look, you know, you can have that kind of Adventism where you're, you know, revising or reclaiming Ellen White into a context of a more progressive gospel Adventist focus. But I said, but as soon as you guys speak up, you get shut down in some way. And they were reassuring me, no, we're working on a project that won't be shut down. It's going to be published by the church itself.
Yeah.
And so when within a very short time, it was taken off the press, taken off Amazon, I didn't want to appear smug, but I did say I told you so to a couple of people that are authors of that within that book. How did you all feel? You must have had some sort of Zoom gathering where you all got together and said, "What's going on? How do we feel about this?"
Let me say
insight.
that among the group of, I think, 10, 12 authors, there are a variety of views. Some from the beginning were quite optimistic, others were quite pessimistic. And I would say that it actually went much further than I thought it would. I did not think Pacific Press would ever actually publish it.
No.
And I would say that I think Dale Galusha, the president of the Pacific Press, is a hero. He went really out on a limb to publish this book. He believed in this book. And I give him a tremendous amount of credit for it. Denominational politics being what it is. We won't get into that. Don't want to, you know, make nasty comments about anybody or any event. But the Pacific Press Board decided to withdraw the book from circulation. And it's now being reprinted, republished by Oak and Acorn, which is also an Adventist publishing house.
Yeah.
But it is one that is owned and operated by the Pacific Union and not by the North American division.
Right. Well, that's good news, and that's hot off the press here. You've got an exclusive today, viewers. Reclaiming the Prophet will
look for it. It will be available on Amazon. I think there will be a Kindle version of it. It may actually be translated in quite a few different languages. I think there's a lot of interest in it. And the whole point of this book is, if we take the research of the last 50 years as a given, what do we have left? And if you go back to the 1919 Bible Conference, you will see people like, at that time, the General Conference president, A.G. Daniels, and Prescott, and H. Camden Lacey, and others saying, her influence in building our church is so important, and her devotional writing is so powerful. Isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? Do we have to do we have to go to her for understanding the Bible or science or history? Isn't it enough that she has built this church and has written this devotional writings of great power? And I think that's sort of the underlying message of this book. Uh, Here's a fascinating, interesting woman, great achievements, a great legacy, and still a powerful devotional writer, but not a source for understanding science, history, or theology.
Mm. So just go back to you find this. You said the three documents where there's her material.
Yeah,
Was it Wycliffe?
it was
Uh,
it was uh, uh, it was James A. Wiley, who
Wiley,
was
I
a
mean, sorry.
Scottish divine
Yeah.
and wrote this history of the Protestant Reformation,
Yes.
which sold numerous editions and lots of copies.
Yeah.
And Ellen White had access to it at the in Basel in 1887 when she was there on a European visit, and that's when she was actually revising the 1884 Great Controversy, expanding it, adding history to what became the 1888 Great Controversy, which is essentially the Great Controversy we still have. There were
Yeah.
some minor changes made in 1911, actually dozens of them, but mostly to correct historical errors,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
which again Prescott and others at the time were very much aware of. Um, but there's a whole lot I can tell you if you're interested about
There.
how the manuscript came to be designed, written, and what you
Yeah.
discover when you study it. But whatever questions you have.
Well, I'm keen to unpack two things: how you felt as you're looking at her handwritten manuscript, you're looking at Wiley's work, you're looking at the final production that Marion Davis had a bit to do with, and I'm interested in how did that feel? Because there must have been a bit of you must have been shaken as you're starting to realize the extent. You'd heard about it, 1919, A.G. Daniels, Prescott, they talked about it. Go way back to Canwright, he talks about that kind of thing. So the church has been aware of this all the way through, but they've been successful in sort of covering it up. So you're in
Well,
the 70s, almost the next person on from A.G. Daniels and Prescott to go, hang on a second. Like you said, pre-Ron Numbers, pre-Walter Ray, pre-The White Lie. Was there a sense of, whoa, this is explosive material I'm holding in my hands?
well, let me say that at that time, the 1919 Bible Conference was not known. It was not.
No.
The church did not become aware of that until
Yeah.
several years later.
Yes.
And I had not
Wow.
studied. I had not studied Canwright on all that other stuff. I had gone into this to show that Ellen White had anticipated modern historical interpretation. And after I had discovered this evidence, then I went back and started looking at the whole history of this.
Well, see, this is
Uh,
blowing my
but I didn't.
mind.
But I didn't have the 1919 Bible. That
No.
was not available till 1979.
See, that's even
Uh,
more mind blowing because like
yeah.
you're kind of ground zero, the person that is sitting there. And that's why I just want to know, how did you feel? What was going on? Because that is just I forgot about that. Yeah, you wouldn't have known about 1919.
No.
A lot of people didn't know about Canwright. This would have been like hang on a second, this is explosive. What were unpack some of the feelings and then let's get into
Well,
the details.
I'll tell you, Peter. When I first looked into this, it was and it is now an appendix in my book. It's about 6 or 7 pages, which look at uh, basically it's called the early English reformers. It's the chapter in Great Controversy on Wycliffe and the Tyndale translation of the Bible and so forth. Uh, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was very disturbed. Uh, and I thought this may just be a unique aberration. So I need to get another example. And in fact, the chapter on it's actually a half chapter. Half is on Huss and half is on Jerome, roughly. There's a story why that turns out that way, but if we get time, we'll get to that.
Mm.
But when I did just the double columns and saw that that the dependency was 100%,
Yes.
I was very disturbed. And what I tried to do is figure out a way to explain it.
Yeah.
And the paper in my book, Ellen White and the Historians, my 1974 paper is presented exactly as I wrote it. So you the reader can see my struggle.
Yeah.
Now, I started these negotiations with Arthur White, and they lasted for about 3 years. It took him a while to get around to it because in the meantime, Numbers book had come out, and there was all that was on the Focus. It was very public. Um, and in my book, which has been published now, I have shown the 1974 introduction, about 40 pages, as I wrote it, and as Arthur White asked me to revise it. And I made revisions, probably more than I should have, because it didn't really ultimately change the evidence. The evidence was in the triple columns. But
Yes.
I softened language to satisfy him. And all that time, my hope was there was sort of an implied deal here, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't print, I don't publish, I don't circulate. You have time to really give some thought to this, but then you need to take the leadership in educating the church. I
Yes.
can't educate the church, but White Estate, the General Conference leadership, you have a responsibility. And as a matter of fact, they blew it
Yeah.
in 1970. Uh, you can this is all outlined in my book because I've had additional chapters written by others to show the context. Arthur White eventually responded in a long series of articles in the review, made some very minor admissions. She could have possibly made some very small errors, but they would be trivial and totally unimportant. That's how far
Yeah.
he would go.
Yeah.
And but I had been trying to salvage her. And
Yeah.
if you read my 40-page introduction, I go to great pains to show that her book evolved as a sort of a theological book, and the
Mm.
history was added after the fact to try to illustrate things. And I was trying to make the point that history was not her focus anyway, so therefore she could borrow from others, she could make mistakes, no problem. And then I also made quite a big deal out of the passage in the introduction to the 1888 Great Controversy, where she acknowledges using the works of historians. Now, there's a story behind why that paragraph is there, and all that's explained in my book. So your readers, you really should read it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
after
this is
the
Ellen White and the Historians.
That's right, that's right. Because in 1884, the 1884 Great Controversy came out. She also published um, uh, the book about the Apostle Paul. Um,
The Connie Bear House and
yes, yes.
yeah.
And Kellogg and others noticed the similarities. And they made a big deal about this with Willie White. They said, look, you can't do this. You can't do this.
Mm.
But the problem they had was not that this undermined her claim to visions. The problem they had was that she was using material without citing it. They said, you need to cite it.
Mm.
And in fact, that discussion took place as they were preparing the 1888 Great Controversy, but there was pressure from the Pacific Press. C.H. Jones was the manager to get the book out, and to go back and try to put in all those footnotes was considered to be too time consuming. And this was a collective decision. It turns out when you get into it, Ellen White is writing, but there's a lot of literary assistance. The publisher has certain
Mm.
demands. It's not as if you think Ellen White had this vision and
No.
said, "Oh, this is so important, I need to put it in a book." That's not what happens. What happens is she decides that the market is right for a book that will expand the history and maybe be attractive to the European audience. And C.H. Jones says, well, the book can only be so long. In order to sell a book successfully, you can't overprice it. And if we make it too big, it's too expensive. So you've got to cut stuff out. That's one reason Marion Davis cut so much out of the manuscript.
Mm.
And so that introduction to the 1888 Great Controversy was discussed. And my guess is that Marion Davis actually wrote that. And, it was agreed to by Willie White and Ellen that was the appropriate thing to say. But if you read that comment very carefully, she acknowledges that she uses historians. She says where they have said something in a very good way, I've used their words, but I haven't cited them because it's universally known. In other words, it's a justification of why I hadn't put footnotes in,
Yeah.
because this is material everybody knows anyway.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you just read that one paragraph, it looks like Kellogg called it a crawl out. He called it a crawl out because it not too far away in the introduction to the 1888 Great Controversy are still the same statements about I saw, it was revealed to me, and so
Yes.
forth. So the position, and this is a subtle point that a lot of people miss, the position of Willie White in 1888 and years following, listen carefully, this is tricky, was that yes, indeed, she used historians and she used their words, but only to describe things she had already seen in vision.
Mm.
And in the process of reading, she would run across these phrases, these sentences, these paragraphs that beautifully described what she had seen, and so she felt that she had a right to use that. Now that is the position that the White Estate held in the 1970s, and I think they still do.
Definitely, yeah.
I think they still
Yeah.
do.
And
Now,
all the Adventist apologists that are, yeah.
So if you read Great Controversy and you actually found a paragraph here and a paragraph there and a couple of sentences here from many different sources, that explanation might hold up. It would still be a little shaky, but it might hold up. Well, I mean, what are the odds that some historian trying to recreate the past based on a bunch of documents would just happen to see it exactly as it actually happened?
Mm. Mm.
Are they inspired?
Exactly.
But then when you finally look at the Huss manuscript and you realize that that's not what's happening, there's one source sitting on the table, and it's read and write and read and write and read and write for days and days and days. It takes a lot of time. The Huss manuscript is 69 pages long with writing on the back of about 11 pages, and these are big pages. And in fact, people will say, well, she does use a few other authors. Well, Huss would quote another author. And so when the editors were putting this all together, they would just, pardon me, they would take Wiley's footnotes and they would then use the other author. So if you can take the footnotes that are now existing in the 1911 Great Controversy, and you can go back and see those are the same sources that Wiley was using in the same order he was using them.
Wow.
See, so really, I mean, Fox's Book of Martyrs, for example, is there for a page or so. It's really one book, and it's just sequential. That is totally incompatible with the idea that she saw that first in vision. Because if you think about this as a historian, when you're condensing 30 years or even 10 years into 10 pages, you're leaving out huge amounts of things. And also the organization, things are happening in two places at the same time. You got to go back and forth. The way you organize that, the way you lay it out is unique to you, the historian. And the way you describe things, the adjectives, the verbs that you use are yours. They're unique. For them to have gotten it exactly right,
Yeah.
it's not credible. It's not
Yeah.
credible.
Yeah.
Then there's also the issue of historical errors. It turns out that when Wiley made historical mistakes, and he was a 19th century writer, he was a Scottish divine, pardon me. And he was relying on sources, sometimes that were 200 years old. Remember, Huss is in the 15th century.
Yeah.
Some of Wiley's sources are 17th century. They're still 200 years have passed, right? And so, Wiley makes mistakes. The mistakes Ellen White makes are just Wiley's mistakes.
Mm.
I mean, she didn't, just come up and get something backwards. That's what she was copying. And so modern scholarship, and I point this out, I did make a big deal out of it at the time because I didn't seem to be all that important. The important thing, she was getting her information from Wiley. But somehow those historical errors bothered by critics more than anything else.
Mm.
It bothered the white estate. It's bothered other critics. And you would be amazed to see the intellectual gymnastics that people go through to try to show that something that is obviously a historical error really isn't a historical error.
Yeah.
I mean, it defies logic sometimes. So that was the first thing that hit me. And then the second thing that hit me is the way Marion Davis had basically rewritten it. When you look at those 69, it may be 80 pages altogether if you count all the stuff on the back. Half of it is completely cut out by Marion Davis. Remember, C.H. Jones at the Pacific Press wants the book to be shorter. We can't have a whole chapter on Huss and a whole chapter on Jerome. You got to put it in one chapter. And the chapter can only be so long. So Marion Davis cuts out half of the work that is non-history. The interesting thing about this manuscript, which people will really find fascinating, although it's tedious reading, is that Ellen White will copy from Wiley page after page, and then she'll go off on a tangent or a spiritual reflection or a reverie of some kind. And she'll go on for 5 or 6 pages describing spiritual stuff. How Huss is suffering as Christ suffered. What Christ thinks looking down on all this. What the devil is doing. All this theological, devotional type of writing. That's actually the genuine, the real Ellen White. That's interesting. It's not history, but it's interesting. But all that's gone. So then the next thing Marion Davis did is that when the actual history, she significantly abridges it. I mean, sometimes 3 or 4 paragraphs become 2 sentences, and then she also rewrites things. In a few places she reorders things. She cuts out half of the history. Now think about that. If she had believed, Marion Davis, wonderful woman, gifted writer, if she had believed that Ellen White had seen all of that in vision, would she have taken the liberty just to cut half of it?
Yeah.
How would she have known which half to cut?
Yeah.
And then to top all of that off, she went back to Wiley, Marion Davis went back to Wiley and took another 15% that Ellen White had skipped over.
Right. And included it.
So when you read Great Controversy and you read the chapter, the half chapter on Huss, Marion Davis was the final decision maker on what went in and what didn't go in. Ellen White would have never allowed that. She obviously reviewed it at some point. She would have never allowed that if Marion Davis had been cutting out stuff she had seen in vision and adding stuff she hadn't seen in vision. Marion Davis wouldn't have done it if she had believed that that's how the book was designed. I mean, it's perfectly clear when you think about this that both Ellen White, Marion Davis, Willie White, C.H. Jones at the Pacific Press, they all understand how this book is being written.
Yeah.
They all understand it. And they respect the fact that Ellen White wants to give a lot of historical examples to fill in her Great Controversy theme. And so they're all right with that. You wonder if maybe some of the hardcore beliefs about Ellen White's visions come from the generation after her. But now we're going down a different path. As a historian, that's what I can show you.
Yeah.
Now, as to what does that imply? How does that redefine inspiration? Is there actually any inspiration at all? All those things are now philosophical and maybe theological issues. And we all might have opinions one way or the other, but as a historian, it's clear that that the source is human history, human historians, and that Marion Davis had a significant role in preparing the book. Now, there's another interesting point. There's also a 29-page manuscript on Jerome in the White Estate. There's the Huss manuscript. There's also a Jerome manuscript. Now, notice this. In 1974, the White Estate discovers the Huss manuscript. I mean, it had been laying in a drawer. They knew it might be something about Huss, but no one had apparently ever read it. It's very difficult to read, by the way. Ellen White's handwriting and use of the English language is far from perfect. So here, for the first time, here comes some outside guy, McAdams, and transcribes it and shows the comparison with the source and the work that Marion Davis has done. If you were at the White Estate and that had happened to the Huss manuscript, and you had a 29-page Jerome manuscript sitting there, what is the very first thing you would have done? You would have either yourself or brought in some scholar and said, let's see if the Jerome manuscript does the same thing. Let's see if it's the same or if it's different. That's so obvious that,
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting that 50 years later, no one's ever done that? The Jerome manuscript has, to my knowledge, never been transcribed. If it has been done by people that have not published it or circulated it, and has laying out comparison with sources. If anyone's done that, they haven't. The White Estate hasn't done it. If anybody else has done it, I think there's some people who have looked at it and maybe looked here and there to see if there's some usage. But isn't it interesting that the White Estate has not wanted to do that to the Jerome manuscript? The obvious explanation is they don't want to know.
Yeah, yeah. And they not only do they not want to know, they don't want other people to know because of what will be revealed. And like you say, back in the day, they knew what was going on with how the books were written, with the Marion Davis, with the original material, with the source material, but they didn't want other people to know that, did they? They wanted even
W.W. Prescott says at the Bible conference that he was in Australia when Ellen White was writing Desire of Ages, and then he helped design what should go in and what should not go in. He discussed with Ellen White and the team, various issues related to the work.
Yeah.
And that in fact, people would say we need some history here. And Ellen White would find a source. Sometimes it was one of the literary assistants who would find a source. Well, here's some information that would fit in here. The fact that it's a team working on this, clearly there's a lead writer. It's her idea. She wants to write a book, and she wants to, here's the overall slant. I'm not denigrating at all the fact that she is the guiding force behind this book, but it's clearly a very collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And those involved know perfectly well that that's what's being selected to be put in the book is not based on visions. Although she undoubtedly may have had some dreams and seen some of these things. Now we get into the speculation about what's actually going on. I do think that the weight of the evidence is pretty overwhelming that Ellen White actually believed her own claims.
Yeah.
I don't see her as a fraud. I see her as someone who sincerely believes that she is that her visions are authentic, that they're from God, and that he's showing her things. And when she tells other people, I believe she's absolutely sincere when she says that. But of course, that doesn't prove it's true. That gets us into this issue of faith and reason. So I'm just a historian. People can have their own ways of explaining all this. But that's the way she worked. And it turns out, here's the interesting thing. You asked about the revisionist historians earlier. It turns out that the more work we do on Ellen White, the more we discover her borrowing. There's a lot of stuff that has not been published, but people show it to me. Uh, I'm not talking about little snippets here and there. I'm talking about 30 and 40 page samples.
Mm.
And it turns out that if you look, you can almost find a source for everything.
Mm.
And interestingly enough, with artificial intelligence available,
Yeah.
and with so many books, it's not hard. I challenge someone who's curious in doing this. Pick some passage that you like. Pick several pages, and go to AI and see if you can find other sources. And to my knowledge, everybody who's ever tried to do that has been able to find sources.
Mm. It seems that those of you that the scholars and academics that have gotten together and put this book out and have that mindset are able to justify what you speak of as, well, see her in context, woman of her times, look at the great things she's done. You're able to kind of deal with it and still be an Adventist. There's those who hear it and are shocked and leave. But there's those who are the traditional Adventists who hear this information and they too go along with the White Estate's claims. Well, she was shown where to go to find material she'd already seen in vision, and this just bolstered it, and it's all out there anyway. It seems that a lot of people that stay in the church justify reasons to keep her on the diet of Adventism. What have you gone through in your own experience in the dark night of the soul moments, which I'm sure you must have had, where the information you were uncovering actually started to make you doubt maybe that she was a prophet, that maybe she was a false prophet? Did you go there at all in your darker moments?
No, I've never really viewed her as a fraud, as a false prophet. It's interesting. My father was a member of the White Estate Board.
Yeah.
I shared this research with him when I was doing it. He was very much opposed to me doing the research and adamantly opposed to me showing it to anybody,
Wow.
because he said it will ruin your career in the church.
Right.
Not because it's a problem, but it's just not smart.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, I
but
mean,
it didn't. But the facts didn't bother him.
yeah,
Growing up in my Adventist home, which I had a wonderful Adventist childhood, I never had. I was never beaten over the head with Ellen White.
no,
So I didn't approach like Walter Ray did. He had invested so much
yeah,
that she was so central to his religious experience that he just couldn't cope with the evidence. She just was never that central to my religious experience.
mm,
She was there. She was, a wonderful person, and yeah, I believe that God had inspired her, but it wasn't the core of my belief system. And maybe I just didn't read enough of her when I was a kid growing up, but so I never looked upon her, and don't to this day. I don't look upon her at all as a fraud. I do think she struggled with this issue of her use of sources.
mm,
There's an interesting letter which I quote I think I quoted in my chapter in this book, Turning Points,
mm,
where one of her literary assistants asks her. I mean, there's a letter. This is documented. I'm not making this up, but it's not right on the tip of my tongue. Asks her, how can she harmonize what she's claiming with the fact that she is using sources? And Ellen White says, it's something I can't explain. because others would never understand it. They don't have the spiritual insight to understand it. I can't explain it.
Interesting.
Um, and if you want me to speculate, I'll be happy to
Yes,
do that. But
I
this
do.
is
I would.
this is speculation. I mean, I don't know.
That's all right. I enjoy speculation. Like
Here's
Steve Daly speculates and draws conclusions that are more damning.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the traditional Adventists don't even speculate. They just go, "Oh, we've got to put that under there and hide that. Put that in our back pocket. Let's not talk about it," and come up with some pretty.
No, I think that there are people who are obsessed with something. Some kids are obsessed with chess. Some are obsessed with music. Some are obsessed with rockets. I mean, you can read biographies of people. I think Ellen White grew up as a very intensely religious girl, just really intensely
Very.
focused on all matters religion. You can read it. I mean, it's pretty clear, you know. And she had a deep, that was her whole life. And I think she did have some. I think she had what we might call ecstatic experiences. And when people have ecstatic experiences, by the way, these are not unusual in history.
No.
There are, probably hundreds of examples that you could pull up as a historian. And by the way, when a culture accepts that there is such a thing as visions, people have them.
Yeah.
When a culture does not accept that people have visions, people don't have them. See, today, now, if I said to you, I had a vision, and I started describing something that God had showed me, you would right off think, oh, well, Don is, he's slipping off here. But in the 19th century, that was very believable.
Yeah.
That was very believable. And because it was very believable, there were a lot of people claiming visions.
Yeah.
I mean, not just one or two. We remember Joseph Smith and others, but there were dozens. And people would say, yeah. And I mean, I can show you all kinds of history on this. 17th century Jesuit priests in Canada, missionaries among the native Canadian tribes. This is well documented in history. I've read the letters, some of them. They would write letters back to the head office in Paris describing visions that they had. In the night, Christ came. There was a huge cross, a big light, and the message was, "You have done all you can in this village. You need to move to another village."
Yeah.
I mean, people had visions all the time.
Yeah.
Now, whether these are divine or not is improvable. It can't be proven, but it's clear that ecstatic experiences are not uncommon. And when people have ecstatic experiences, what do they see in those experiences? The things that they are obsessed with and think about a lot. So if Ellen White has ecstatic experiences, they're going to be about religion, because that's the big thing in her life.
Yeah.
And I think that she believed him. And the view in those days in the 19th century, I think, is that if you're a prophet and have visions, you have to be infallible. You have to be original. And since that's the mold I need to fit in, if I'm going to be accepted as a prophet, I have to accept that mold. And so I think maybe she was caught in that a bit. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but
I guess
I do believe she had ecstatic experiences. She believed they were divine. There's no way to prove that they were. There's no way to prove that they weren't.
I guess when I look at something like that, and one of the reasons I left the Adventist church, is that whenever I come across anyone having superstitious, ecstatic, charismatic prophecies, visions, I'm not putting them down. I suggest that they really believe they're having them, but I wouldn't base my belief system on those. And what surprises me, I guess, is when a lot of the Adventist apologists that are scholars and academics, that have revealed a lot of this information, instead of just saying, well, that's a lot of lot of just for its time, understandable, contextually, even parts of the world today, there's all sorts of people having visions and ecstatic, but they wouldn't be drawn to anyone today like that, and yet they're defending Ellen White quite a bit. That just surprises me. Like I tend to look at it and go, well, boy, that's certainly not for me. I'm not going to try and justify that. She may have believed it. She comes from a time where it was everywhere, but that certainly puts her in the category, for me personally, that she has been part of creating a movement that is based on really kind of delusions. And so I had to kind of leave. I fully understand people who stay, but I kind of am on a bit of a journey in trying to understand why those who have revealed so much to me about her cray-cray side and delusional side and ecstatic side seem keen to somehow make her still fit in the narrative of their whole belief system. Maybe deep down they're just being cultural Adventists and they enjoy potluck and haystacks and the wonderful camaraderie and group of friends they've made. I understand why traditional Adventists hang on to her, because they've got a lot riding on it. They fully believe she's a prophet. They have no problems with her being that visionary, authoritative person that God spoke to. I understand why the leadership continue to support her, because they're making squillions of dollars from her books and her true believers. I understand why people leave. Part of my journey in the last year is why do the Case Bolts and McAdams and Trenchards and Valentines and Butlers, why do they stay? What's going on? Not as a judgment, just as a purely like, I'm sure if Mary Baker Eddy came along today and tried to convince you that she was having visions, or Joseph Smith, or many people that do exist on the planet today of equal caliber to Ellen, if they came to Don McAdams and said, hey, look, I've had this thing, you wouldn't join their movement. Why do you stay in a movement that is so entrenched and marinated in possibly just ecstatic visions that were quite deluded?
Well, the Adventist Church is like my extended family. And I got relatives who I don't like and I disagree with on this and that, but they're still family, you know?
But this is more than family. That is valid, I think, because it places you in a center, in a position of being a cultural Adventist. And I understand that. I mean, I still hang out with Adventists all the time. I do this show. I have more to do with Adventists than ever before. But I wouldn't say I would believe in what their ideology, because we're family. And a lot of the Adventist apologists that are scholars and academics don't want to go that far. They'll say we're family, but the ideology is absolute woo-woo. They'll tell me behind the scenes that it is. I chatted to someone last night and he was saying, and he's doctorate, high-level Adventist church leadership position. And he says, oh, the 1844 doctrine is absolute garbage. He used the word garbage. And yet he's an Adventist. He loves going to church. He preaches every week. He's an academic. He's a scholar. Why won't the Adventist scholars and apologists at least say that more publicly? Does it shake the boat too much, rock the boat too much?
Well, I'm a historian, not a theologian. I have not studied 1844. It does appear to me, based on reading theologians and others who have, that the biblical evidence is not there.
Yeah, exactly.
That if you study the Bible honestly, understanding it using the best scholarship available, you don't get 1844 and the heavenly sanctuary
Yeah.
and all that. It's just not there.
Yeah.
It's not there. And so I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
I think that's probably true.
I agree, and
Um,
I guess it's perhaps more of a psychological um, study of human behavior. Why does Rod Numbers leave and Don McAdams stays when the actual root level of their beliefs is probably very similar? And
well,
cultural reasons to stay are good, but
don't you think that at root, I'm going out on a limb here. Don't you think that at root everybody is an agnostic?
oh, I agree,
That
100%.
is,
Yeah,
you may claim I believe this, I believe that, but do
yeah,
you really know? Do you really know? What do you really know?
yeah,
And the universe is a mystery.
yeah. I
I mean, you
agree.
start talking about quantum physics and relativity and the Big Bang, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Experimentally, it appears to be true, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. The world is existence, time, and space. There's a lot of mystery here,
yeah,
and I don't mind being really humble and saying I don't know. I just don't know.
yeah,
You know. But here's what I want to believe, and if unless there's evidence convincing me that I can't believe it, why shouldn't I go ahead and believe it? You know, you asked me earlier about this my definition of faith. I don't know if this is a theological definition. I don't know if this is a biblical definition. This is my common sense logical definition.
mm,
Faith is belief in something you can't see, you can't prove.
mm,
I mean, I think there's biblical support for that, the Apostle Paul. But if there's a fact that is a fact and it's observable, why would faith play a role? It does. Faith's not needed. I don't need faith to know that Moscow is the capital of Russia. I don't need faith to know that Washington is north of Atlanta. I don't need faith for anything that I can observe. I don't need faith. Why would I have, faith has no role there, right? Um, things that I can disprove, I can't believe. If I can disprove it, I can't believe it. I can't say by faith I believe that the earth is flat. Because you can prove that it's round. We
mm,
now have pictures from outer space showing
mm,
it.
yeah,
You know? So I can believe Christianity, even though there's that agnostic element of, you don't really know,
yeah,
but you can't disprove it.
yeah,
You can't disprove it.
yeah,
And I can believe that God used Ellen White in special ways. Can't disprove that. But I can disprove that she based her books on visions. I can disprove that.
yeah,
And I can prove that some of her claims aren't warranted.
yeah,
Okay? I can prove that. So I can't believe that. I can't believe what I can disprove. But I can believe what is not provable or disprovable.
yeah,
And that now I remember someone, I don't know if this is genuinely Ted Wilson or not, but someone quoted to me once that he said, faith trumps reason.
yeah. I've heard him say that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
when you think about it, that's sort of a silly statement because
yeah,
reason is what led you to believe faith in the first place.
yeah,
If faith is triumphant, you can believe anything.
yeah,
You can be a Muslim, you can be a pagan, you can be
yeah.
a snake worshiper, you can be
From
you can be anything
yeah,
by faith.
yeah,
I mean, reason sort of directs you to choose a faith. You choose a faith because of reason.
mm,
And once you've chosen a faith, if it can't be disproven, you can hang with it. If it can be disproven, you can't. And
that's
I'm
right.
open
Yeah,
to and I'm open to evidence. I'm open to evidence. But
yeah,
I'm agnostic about a lot of things. I'm humble. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I want to believe some things, so I do. And if you can't disprove them, I'm going to keep believing them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think faith can be used to defend any belief claim. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. That's
So
right.
I certainly don't make claims or belief claims.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I I I think you and I are probably on the same page with 99% of how you approach this. I just think somewhere deep down that what gospel Adventists, progressive Adventists, the scholars, the academics, those who are wanting to fit Ellen into the equation, um, are more comfortable with the culture and are therefore saying, well, if you can't disprove it, well, I can choose to stay. And that's a valid reason for people to
Well,
personally make. I
well,
of
Peter,
course.
the implied thesis of this book is that Ellen White was a historical person of great significance.
Mm.
I don't think that's debatable. I
No,
think she was a
but
historical person of
but
great significance.
but so is
And
Joseph Smith.
and just as we study and enjoy reading the works of George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, uh, they're significant historical figures, and they
Mm.
deserve our interest, and they deserve our attention, and they deserve our study.
They
You know,
aren't making claims to be prophetic,
that's
though.
right. That's
And
right. But
Joseph Smith
that's just the
Joseph
first point. That's
yeah.
just the first point.
Mm.
The other point that I think is confirmed is that Ellen White's books, however they were put together, have significant devotional power. They have the power to move people. Uh, Now, by the way, so do other books.
Yeah. We mentioned Mary Baker Eddy. We mentioned
Books by Billy Graham, whatever. I
Joseph
mean,
Smith.
yeah,
My concern or interest, it's not even a concern because we all make our own decisions
yeah,
of, certainly people wouldn't agree with me that I'm very agnostic about my approach because I can't prove anything. So therefore, I'm not going to make any claims. But it appears to me that if if it's the defense of Ellen White that I find unusual. Like, I don't mind people being a Mormon and saying, I had that movement in my heart. I felt, and I believe Joseph, and you can't prove him wrong. And when people become apologists for a particular prophet claiming person,
yeah.
that's where I don't know. I just enter this kind of strange space where I think something feels like they've either been
Well,
duped, they're
I
being disingenuous, are they
I
being
don't
dishonest, are they deluded? What? Why
I don't
defend it?
I don't consider myself an apologist
Right, right.
at all. No, I'm not an apologist. The apologists believe things that they put a lot of stock in not breathing,
Mm.
uh, and lifting a heavy Bible,
Yes.
and what you might call it the miracle Ellen White, you know. And as a historian, the supporting documents are so weak and so thin that uh, no qualified historian would consider those as being determinative.
Yeah,
I mean, they're sort of a rule among historians is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence,
yeah.
and the evidence for these extraordinary claims are not extraordinary.
No,
They're
exactly.
they're they're extremely weak,
Yeah.
extremely weak. So an apologist would bring those up. Uh,
The thing is though that
but
people,
I don't think the authors of Reclaiming the Prophet would consider themselves apologists. I think they would say, look, we're historians. We're describing Ellen White as a woman, Ellen White as a preacher, Ellen White as a, you know, devotional writer, Ellen White is a mother, whatever.
mm,
We're introducing her uh, to the readers as a real person who struggled and had problems, and um, you know, and we see value in her life, and we see
here
value in her works.
yeah.
But that's
Here's the thing that I would counter with that, is that perhaps you guys don't realize that when you simply say Ellen White was an inspiration and a very incredible person with beautiful devotional abilities, and she has brought many people to seeing a beautiful gift of devotion and Jesus, we who don't have the kind of academic abilities to kind of process all of this stuff, that one statement that you guys all have made, that she's a wonderful, devotional, inspired individual, to the masses that are progressives but don't have quite the ability to spend as much time on the material. And I did this till I left at age 54. I just devoured all of your material, all of these guys. We go, oh, wow, okay, yes, we can still be an Adventist. It's one of the biggest, most subtle apologist moves to say that she's just a beautiful devotional person, because we were raised with all the critiques of Ellen that you guys put forward and were revealed to us, but we didn't quite want to leave because that meant so much. It was such a big move to do, and we were shocked by the white lie, and in many ways by Ron Number's book. But we would then go, but we're not leaving because these guys are pointing out that she's flawed and human and inspiring and devotional, and she leads us at least to the Bible. But on the other hand, she does so much damage to people because of all the ways she treated people, because of all the copying, because of all the testimonies, because of the many things that create a sense of legalism within the church. At the root of all the last generation theology is Ellen White, because of the food for worms visions, because of the fear of probation closing. To me, the fear, the legalism, the traditional Adventist perspective is quite dangerous for people's mental health. And so you guys have come along and done incredible work that I just have been so grateful for, from George Knight in the late 80s to the release of your
Peter,
material.
don't you think the church leaders should have welcomed this book?
Well, my point is they never will.
But this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for them. They should welcome this.
But you know, and I know that they never will. So what I see is that it is offering false hope to people to think they ever will accept it, because they are never going to. And we look back now that we can look back at 1919. We can look back at a lot of the Grieve and the New Zealanders in the 30s and 40s. We can look back to Canwright, 1888, A.G. Daniels, Questions on Doctrine, Des Ford. We can look to the many, many times where progress, gospel Adventism, pointing to Jesus, was attempted to have a foothold and influence, but it just never has had it. And recently, again, another local scholar academic said, well, we want to not talk too loudly about it because we'll lose our influence. And I thought, well, you've got no influence because you're not boldly shouting it. And one thing I was so pleased about was you guys have boldly shouted it. Yeah. And Des Ford did with his October 27, 1979 forum meeting. You've all had times where you've shouted it from the rooftops, but you've been significantly shut down. And I just wonder if there's a time to go, you know what, it's never going to change. I'm just going to enjoy the haystacks and my mates and hanging out together.
Well,
because I think what my point is that I don't think you guys realize how influential you're you are Adventist apologists. You think you're not, but you're actually saying things that make so many people write to me and say, oh, phew, Denny Fortune said this, and Don McAdams said this, and Gil Valentine, they're still in the church and they believe she was devotional. And after all, she never claimed to be a prophet anyway. And so they stay, and they stay because you guys have painted her in such a way that is incredibly palatable to the progressive Adventist. But as you know, and all of these guys know, the Adventist church leadership, wide estate, is never, ever going to allow you guys to have traction.
Well, could be. But you know, there are lots of different kinds of Adventists. I think that's something that the world church is going to have in the centuries, decades to come, more and more so,
Until they speak publicly about that
more and more
special
so.
kind, though. Like as soon as
People, people just you know, they just believe what they believe and then go ahead and enjoy life. Um,
exactly, until
you
they
know,
say it publicly, and then they're shut down.
but you know, I last worked for the Adventist Church in 1983.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, when I left Southwestern, what became Southwestern Adventist College, uh, that was in 1983, and I moved to Houston, and I've had a very interesting life, doing all kinds of things. I am not in any way, shape, or form threatened by church leaders.
Yeah,
You
I've
might say
noticed.
I'm invulnerable. I can't be hurt. I've
Yeah,
made a fair amount of, you know, I've been fortunate in the business world, and you know, I've had a wonderful life, and the church leaders can think about me whatever they want. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to me.
yeah,
I'm a historian. I found some evidence. I think it's important, and I've made it available.
yeah.
The church can do with it what they choose. I think they would be smart to accept the evidence.
I
If they
agree with
don't, they
you.
don't. But
Yeah,
that's not my problem.
yeah, I agree.
It's not my problem.
And just to highlight again your book, this is, and we're talking to Dr. Don McAdams about his book and many other things, Ellen White and the Historians. What you've presented there, as I said earlier, and I'm not saying it in a flippant way, I've never said it to any other person I've interviewed, you are ground zero for bringing this material to light and influenced Ron Numbers and influenced Walter Ray. And that book is pretty much all of the material you were uncovering in the 70s. Um, and I didn't realize that you'd kind of left in 83 church employment. So that's given you a bit more freedom to speak. Can you share with us some of your memories and connections you had with Walter Ray, Ron Numbers, and then later Fred Veltman?
Well, I never knew Fred Veltman.
Okay.
Um,
Because he started, I think, his project in 84 from memory. Yeah.
well, he actually started it in 80, 81, I think, but he didn't finish it until 84, 5, somewhere
Right.
in there. Um, well, let's start with Ronnie. Ronnie, I was first year. I went to Duke for a PhD in history. Got a job at Andrews. I believe it was my second year there, maybe my third year there, that Ronnie joined as a member of the faculty. His office was right next to mine. We became very good friends. He was a very good ping pong player. We used to play a
Right.
lot of ping pong in my basement. Uh, and we would go out to dinner, he and his wife and my family, and we were good friends. And then he was only there a year, and he got a job offer at Loma Linda. The dean of the medical school, Dr. Hinshaw, had decided that the medical students ought to have a little bit of knowledge about the history of science. And so he hired Ron to create a course on the history of science for med students. According to Ronnie, the med students resented the course. They wanted to get on with learning real stuff. And
Mm,
this was a distraction, and it was just taking time, and the enrollment was not very sad. It wasn't required. I think it was an elective, and very few people took it. And so Ronnie basically didn't have much to do.
mm.
And I think, as the story goes, I don't remember all the details. Um, I think he found a copy of one of Ellen White's books, the one on health, that
Yes.
that had been all kinds of marginal notes, that this is from such and such, and this is from such and such, and he thinks the book was that those were John Harvey Kellogg's notes.
Wow.
So he decided that he might do some work on this.
This is early 70s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been, 71, 72. And so we met one year at the American Historical Association and the Modern Language Association met at the same time in New York. And one of my colleagues, a good friend, William S. Peterson, Bill, who had dabbled in Ellen White. He'd written an article about Ellen White and the French Revolution in an early issue of Spectrum. He and Ronnie and I had lunch. And I remember Ronnie said, I'm thinking about writing a book about Ellen White and health. And Bill and I said, well, you ought to do that. That would be great. You ought to do that. We both dabbled in it. It's sort of interesting. It's sort of fun. You're learning stuff. It's not what we thought. And you should do that. And so we stayed in touch and, remained friends. He, of course, gradually ended up at the University of Wisconsin, where he had, as you know, a distinguished, truly impressive, distinguished career as an historian. Walter Ray, so Ronnie was a good friend.
Now, just before we get on,
in fact, I talked to him just a short time before he died.
Passed away. He had a good sense of humor too, didn't he?
Great sense of humor.
I did
Great
an
sense of
interview
humor.
with him and John Butler at the same time, and we spent so much time just cacking and laughing. Now, before we get on,
Walter Ray,
I'll just stop you for a second. Before you get on to Walter Ray, we're just going to have a quick 5-minute break. Come back and talk about Walter Ray, and also if Ron had gotten a copy of that that you'd send out, the manuscript you'd send out to a few people. I'm interested in that, and then we'll close with some thoughts on some books that have been released that I've heard you talk about that I'm keen to just get your thoughts on.
Okay.
But at this time, we traditionally just have a break. Those like to go and get another hot brew and go to the loo or whatever. So I'm talking to Dr. Don McAdams, absolutely loving our conversation. I hope you didn't feel I was pushing back there. I'm just fascinated with how people think. I'm a street epistemologist, and I think I like to find out what people believe, why they believe it, but can they defend it? So sometimes I like to ask some questions that I'm definitely not being disrespectful. I'm just learning, and I'm really appreciating your honest answers. So thank you.
Yeah.
And we will be right back after this short break with Dr. McAdams talking a little bit more about his friendship with Ron Butler and also how he may have chatted to and even influenced Walter Ray a little bit. We'll be right back.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
And we're back. And thank you. Coach Work just said, no, where are we going? Oh, here we go. I love Peter's music. Thank you for that, Coach Work. I appreciate that. And those who'd like to go and listen to that whole album, you can just go to Spotify over there and scan that code, and you can enjoy some relaxing music.
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was my kind of role in the Adventist Church. I was a musician and would travel around playing music, and I had a wonderful, wonderful time.
Did you play an instrument?
Yes, played guitar. That's me playing guitar there and singing. And
Really, that's you?
that's me. Yes.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I'm a musician too, sort of.
Interesting.
I
So is
play
Warren
the
Trenchard.
I play the viola.
Really? Well, there
Yeah,
was some viola in that, some cello, viola, and some
yeah,
synthesizer strings in the
yeah.
background.
Very nice.
The viola is one of my favorite instruments.
Yeah, I like it. Has a sort of a
Yes,
mellow sound.
yes, and it's right in that register that is very smooth, and it
Yeah,
just enhances anything it's involved with. Wow.
yeah,
I discover that a lot of people that are, into this kind of topic and talking about, theology and churches and movements and why people do things and why they believe things, etc., are often musicians as well. It's interesting. We're just about to talk a little bit about Walter Ray. I've gotten in touch with his son, and he's going to be coming on the show and sharing some of his memories of those times.
yeah.
He's a lawyer somewhere there in the States. Um, had Ron Numbers gotten a copy of that manuscript that you'd sent around
Yes, yes.
before he wrote his book?
Well, as he was writing it, I mean, he had started, and I take no credit, by the way, for him making that decision. He made that on his own, but I
Mm,
knew it. I knew it was coming before he really got started, and I was glad and encouraged him. Uh, he actually wanted to cite my paper and discuss it in his book,
mm,
but I asked him not to.
yeah,
I was still in the process of negotiating with the White Estate. And I still thought at that time that the church would accept responsibility for
yeah,
re-educating the membership, and that I didn't want to muddy the water on that point.
yeah.
Um,
And I
and
I
I,
think I've heard you say somewhere that the church is at a bit of a crossroads again. They're given an
yeah,
opportunity right now again, uh,
right.
with in many ways, with this being a bit of a lightning rod, this book, Reclaiming the
Yeah.
Prophet, to
And
address
you're
the
and you're and you're
basic.
predicting this turning point will also be passed without a turn. And
Exactly.
you may well be right. You may well be right.
And
But
I,
never
I feel, no judgment towards those who
does.
maintain hope,
It's
but
yeah.
I just, that's just my personal thought.
Well,
Uh,
to follow up on the conversation from earlier, um, I was saying there are many kind of Adventists.
mm,
Uh, I would not identify myself as an active Adventist.
yeah,
I am an Adventist, but I would identify myself as an inactive Adventist who
interesting.
does not spend all of his time worrying about the church.
No,
Um, my interest is 18th century, early 19th century European history. I read a lot of books on history. I have my music. I'm a cyclist. I have pets. I have a wonderful family. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Ellen White,
yeah,
and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the problems of the Adventist Church. Uh, but I
and
decided in 2022, I decided to go ahead and publish that paper that I'd
yes,
written 50 years earlier, just to get it out there
yeah,
where it could never be destroyed. As
yes,
long as it was sitting in the White estate, who knew what future it held?
it's
Once it got out of the book, I figured it would be around for a while, and that sort of was my legacy.
yeah,
Uh, and since that's happened, I've gotten some people like you and Denny Noon and others who want to talk to me, but I'm
mm,
not soliciting opportunities to speak.
yeah,
and
yeah.
uh, and whatever will be, will be. It's not my problem, and I won't spend a lot of time worrying about it one
It
way or the other.
it's interesting because I had heard rumors of you, before you released this book, and I've just brought it back up onto the
Yeah,
screen, Ellen White and the Historians: A Neglected Problem and Forgotten Answer. I
yeah,
highly recommend those watching, if you only buy 3 Adventist-style, books, uh, this year, make this one of them. It's a really great
yeah,
read, and as you said, it's a legacy item.
yeah.
So I heard
It's
rumors of you, and first up with, I'm just looking for his book. Oh, I've just got a mental blank. He left the church. I interviewed him 5, 6 years ago. Um, before you released the book. And he was speaking about, he said, there's a guy out there who had the original Ellen White manuscript, and he had this and that, and he talked about you, mentioned your name, and I started trying to find, and I thought, oh, it's just not out there, it's not available. And he mentioned the people who'd got the manuscripts in the 70s and how people had passed them on secretly and unbeknownst to you, and how you were hoping to that the church would resolve it, and that was why you had promised to keep quiet about it, because it was their responsibility, and I respected that. So anyway, that's a big prelude to me saying, so when that book came out, I was like, yes, this is such an important document. And
It is. That's one reason I published it, because in the history of the Adventist Church, it is a document that is worth preserving.
yes, and the same with when I spoke to Warren Trenchard last week. I don't know what happens if I bring this up. Oh yeah, the Desire of Ages and its Sources. That book, I think, is a wonderful resource for
It
people to
is.
read
It
as
is.
well. And I mentioned to you, Valentine, Casebolt, Trenchard, McAdams. They're my four, I think, very important people for readers and people interested in this content to go and read. And I'm going to try real hard to get Don Casebolt on the program in the next few weeks, and I'll have my trilogy then of the the three. But and I genuinely mean that. I just was so excited when your material came out. When I read Casebolt's Miller's Daughter, was it his
Yeah.
first of the two? What was the other one?
Yeah.
I've read that introduction or the preface, and I thought, boy, I don't know how anyone can be a Seventh-day Adventist after even reading that. But a lot of you guys have found a way to be able to remain in the church. But like you just said, you're not placing it front and center. You're not kind of reading Ellen White every day and following the testimonies and I think that's a healthy thing for people to do. It's interesting though that if Ellen was correct and the messages from God to her were true, what a profound message that is for the last days, for the imminent return, for the investigative judgment, probation, closing. It's such a unique message. It's like so special that surely no Adventist who really believed Ellen White would in any way want to say, I did a gig the other night and someone said, oh, I have nothing to do with Ellen White. And I'm like, well, if she was a genuine prophet with such a message, surely people wouldn't want to say they don't read her. So that's why I guess when I hear sometimes the scholars and the academics,
Well,
with this material, I think why defend her at all?
If I were a prophet and I wanted to make sure that people hung in there with me throughout long periods of history, you can bet your life that one of the things that I would prophesy would be that there would be critics, and that would be proof that I was inspired, and that would be a sign of the end. That'd be a good thing to prophesy with if you were, a prophet. But I don't mean to be too cynical.
That's a good point.
So let's go back to Walter Ray.
Yes.
Let me say that Walter Ray's research is totally independent. I don't know that it was influenced by me at all. I think he had started down the track before he became aware of my work, but he did become aware of my work, and he was interested in it. And at the time, I was president at Southwestern Adventist College. And Walter Ray wrote letters. In those days, we didn't have email. He wrote letters, and we exchanged a few letters. And he kept wanting me to, speak out and support the research he was doing. And I really didn't know for sure what he was doing. He actually came to Keene, to Southwestern Adventist College, to speak. I did not invite him. he was invited by some people in the religion department to talk about the, challenges of being a pastor, financial, personal, preaching, visiting. It's a complicated, stressful job. And so I do remember him. And he had been a classmate of Ted Wilson, of Neil Wilson, and Bob Olson at Pacific Union College, and he had been sending them evidence of the we'll call it borrowing, uh, and in the mid 70s, 77, 78, he was sending them, and at some point. They kept promising him that they would examine his work and give him a hearing.
Mm.
And finally, the hearing was held. I think I remember specifically, it was in the early January of 1980. And it was held at the Glendale Hospital in Southern California. And there were about 20, 22, or 23 people who were there to be, you might say, a judge and jury to give him a hearing. And I was one of those people. In fact, I think I'm the only delegate that is still alive who was there.
I think Jim Wagner, Walter Ray's lawyer, was there,
He was.
and he's watching today.
Oh, is he? And he's still alive. Well,
He's
good.
still-
Then
yeah.
well, I was a
There's two of
delegate.
you.
So
There's two
yeah.
of you.
So
Yes, you're the only delegate.
I was a member of the committee. Yeah. And by the way, I kept a journal in those days, and I recorded there were 2 days, and I can recount for you the 2 days in some detail, but I
Yes.
won't.
Oh, you
But
can.
the interesting thing is that on the afternoon of the second day, we had finally finished. Walter had made his case. We'd had discussions, uh, and interaction, and it was now our time to share our reaction. Everybody that was there, to my knowledge, a few people may have remained quiet, but nearly everybody who was there spoke up. Now, the chairman was the current secretary of the General Conference. The secretary of the group was the number one guy at the White Estate, the director of the White Estate. These are serious church leaders. There were some union presidents, conference presidents, and some scholars. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that I knew more about the problem, more about the issue than anybody else there besides Walter. None of the other ones had devoted time to studying Ellen White's use of sources. Bob Olson obviously knew more about Ellen White than me, but this source issue was new to him too. At the end of that session, everybody spoke up and said, "This is new. This is new. This is new information. I had whiffs and hints about this in the past, but this is way more than I expected." Of course, I still believe in Ellen White. Everyone made those, assuring statements. But they said the church has got to face up and do something about this. And we voted recommendations. And those recommendations included specifically a broad scale, deep education process for the entire church.
Wow.
And to show up in textbooks, in periodicals, retraining for evangelists, the works. It was an official recommendation of that committee.
Wow.
And that recommendation was taken to PREXAD, which is the small advisory group for the president of the General Conference. And they endorsed that recommendation.
What?
Sometime in the spring of 1980, April, somewhere in there. Another one of the recommendations that they endorsed was that deep study be given by a scholar to Desire of Ages. The first recommendation was canceled. It was there, and I can't find any evidence of when it officially was abandoned, but it just was never implemented. And I think the reason for that goes to Des Ford.
Right.
And I'll show you the connection in just a minute. The recommendation that the scholar be engaged to look at Desire of Ages was implemented. The person that they had in mind at the time was Jim Cox,
That's right.
who was a New Testament scholar at the seminary. Good friend of mine, by the way. Wonderful, smart guy. Loved him. He meanwhile had got a call to Avondale to be president.
Yes. He was president when I was studying here.
And so the job was given to Fred Veltman.
Yeah.
I did not know Fred Veltman. I knew he was a religion professor at Pacific Union College. But Walter Ray, his evidence was new. It wasn't that it was new because people didn't know that there was some borrowing. It was massive. If
Right.
you read The White Lie, you get
Mm.
I mean, he couldn't put everything in one paperback. He had a whole lot more than what was in The White Lie. I mean, it was
Right.
just massive amounts of borrowing. And the recommendation for a broad re-education of the church was made by the committee and endorsed by Prexad.
Wow.
And then it never happened. Because if you recall, this meeting was at Glendale in early January of 1980. In something maybe September of 1979 is when Des Ford had made his famous address at Pacific Union College that set that wagon rolling down the hill. And the White estate, Arthur White considered Des Ford to be a direct attack on Ellen White.
Mm.
And somehow during the late spring, early summer, that whole idea of broadly educating the church was shelved.
Mm.
I don't know why, but I would venture to guess that the brethren were open to re-educating the church on Ellen White. And then as they had second thoughts about that, because they realized that if they did that, it would, in a sense,
Mm.
confirm Des Ford.
Yes. Wow.
And it's one thing to have concerns about her borrowings from other writers. It's another thing to challenge 1844.
Yeah.
And I think they realized that if they went ahead with their re-education program for the church, it would undermine their defense of 1844 from Des Ford, because he was pointing out that the Bible, you couldn't support it from the Bible, and yet Ellen White was very adamant about it. And I believe that is the reason why. If you also remember, there was a general conference session in the late summer, early fall, maybe October, somewhere in there. There was a general conference session. That was the general conference session when a statement was added to the fundamental beliefs about Ellen White.
The ongoing authority.
So right there in 1980 was a really big turning point.
Mm.
And I think that and Walter Ray had the goods, you might say.
Yeah.
And the evidence was there, and the church leaders knew it. But at the end they blinked. Just like in 1919, they knew it, but when it came to propagating it, they pulled back.
Yeah.
Because the members in 1919 were not open at all to any questions about the accuracy and authority of everything Ellen White wrote. However, in 1980, the church was far more open to it than it was in 1919. And I think they could have, if they had had the courage, began to open that door. And I was at the time, I was very optimistic and very pleased. I thought, it's happening.
Yeah.
And then there was the pullback.
Yeah.
So then Walter, when the pullback happened, Walter then said, well, fine, I'm going to publish a book.
Yeah.
So he went to the LA Times, big story, and his book came out. So that's the background. So I knew of Walter's work, and he knew of my work, but I think his work had started before me.
Right.
I think he was digging around.
Right.
And gradually assembling more and more. But I think I think probably reading my book, my paper encouraged him to believe that I'm not the only one that's finding stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, the significant thing about my book is that it is the only one where we have the holograph,
Yes.
Ellen White's own handwritten
Yes.
copy.
Yeah.
So in all the evidence about her borrowing, the Huss manuscript is the most definitive because we have her own handwriting. We have the clear paraphrasing throughout from James A. Wiley, and we can see what role Marion Davis had. And there's no other research that gives you that kind of insight because except for maybe the Jerome manuscript, which maybe someday somebody will examine.
Is that something you've thought about doing now that AI is around? You could do it a lot more easily.
I thought about it. But you know, I've got a very busy life, and furthermore, I'm an old man. I've got, I don't know that I have the stamina to commit to another book.
You seem to have lots of energy.
Well, I'm not. When people say how you doing, I say not bad for an old guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, that's some interesting insights. So the notes you took at that meeting where you felt a sense of hope, and with the Prexad soon after, though it all sounds like it was dashed. What do you still have those documents?
Yeah.
Are they available in print somewhere for people?
It might be in my chapter in this book here.
Is it?
I don't, or it might be in the article that I wrote for Spectrum recently.
What would it be called, so we can just let people know to go and look it up?
Okay, let me see if I can find it here.
And just those who might have joined us while Don is looking that up, the Reclaiming the Prophet. Don was one of the.
Yeah, here it is. Here it is. This is a quotation on page 143, and it's a quotation from my journal. And here's the resolution. I'll read it.
Yeah.
That as soon as possible, a plan be developed for thoroughly informing our church administrators concerning the nature and extent of Ellen White's use of sources. And then I might have even put in here the Prexad.
You mentioned Prexad.
I think I actually quote the Prexad resolution in here too. I've forgotten what I've written here, but anyway, take a look. It's there. It's there.
And just talking about Ford there, and that's an interesting theory. I think that's a valid one there.
Well, there's some reason why they did, and that certainly was a good reason.
Yeah.
If that's the reason they chose, you can understand it.
What are your brief thoughts on Des Ford and Glacier View? Did you know him personally?
No, I did not know him personally. I never. His tapes were circulating. I never listened to them. I was just busy with other things.
Yeah. You were like you've kind of highlighted there was two kind of trains of thought going along, and in some ways they cancelled each other out.
I mean, I heard, I heard that he had been given a raw deal at Glacier View.
Yeah.
And I understood. Here's the church protecting itself, and it's a shame, but I was not a delegate to that event.
Yeah. Why do you think Warren Trenchard wasn't approached to do because I know he went along to the meeting that you guys had, I'm pretty sure, but he's not on the
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask Eric. Eric
Yeah,
Anderson is really the spark plug that made this go, and
yeah.
he was suggesting uh, topics for people.
Mm,
Uh, I don't recall. I don't recall Warren saying, "Hey, I could write something on this,"
yeah.
or Eric saying, "Warren, why don't you write something?" I don't recall. I don't recall
Well,
any conversation about that.
Warren said last week that he would have turned down an offer to write for it. I can't remember why. It was a really good conversation, by the way. Those watching, go and watch the Warren Trenchard interview. Make sure you watch this entire one. And I'm crossing fingers. Maybe you can point me in the right direction to get
Well,
Don.
let me tell you, Warren is a really good scholar, and
Yeah.
he was a seminary student at Andrews when all this stuff was going on.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I remember making a presentation on my paper at the time, Ellen White and the Protestant Historians, and Warren being in the audience asking really good questions.
Yeah.
And I was saying to myself, that he was a seminary student at the time. I was saying to myself, "That's a really bright young man."
Yes. Yeah.
You could tell. You could tell
Yeah. Oh,
he
look.
was really sharp.
Uh,
Case Bolt was
yeah.
one of my students, and
Yeah.
he read my paper. He was interested in it at the
Yeah.
time, and he read it, and he had so then he went and made a study of the chapter on the
Yeah.
Waldensians, and of course came up with the same results.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I lost track of him for many years, and then we renewed correspondence. I haven't visited with him. He lives in, I think, Southern California, and I
Yeah.
live in Texas. Uh, but Don has done really interesting work on
Yeah.
Ellen White as a child,
Yes.
really,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
as a young teenager,
Yeah.
uh, from 11, 12, 13, 14 in those years.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And
Well, if you can put a good word in, imagine if I could have him on next week, then I would have had the three of you on in a row.
well, I'm certain he would be very happy to do it. He
Yeah.
really enjoys opportunities to talk about his work.
Maybe
Uh,
you could send me his
and I
email.
will say this:
Yeah.
Don is someone who's actually put forth a solution.
Yeah.
The rest of us have said,
Here's the
well,
info.
we don't know for sure what was going on. You know, she had ecstatic experiences. There's historical evidence for that. Here's
Yeah.
what she said she saw. Um, you know, there's no way of proving or disproving that.
Yeah.
It appears that the weight of the evidence is she sincerely believed that.
Yeah.
Don then is the one that comes forth with a theory he calls confabulation.
Right. Yes.
So
I've heard
you
him.
have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe you could send me his email address in the private chat there, and I'll send him a message straight after today. Because if I could have Trenchard, McAdams, and Casebolt one after the other,
when we shut down tonight, which needs to be in the near future. I'm going
I've
to
got one
send you
last
his.
thing.
I'll send you his email.
That would be great. Yeah. I just wanted you to kind of rapid fire. I as I said earlier, I've watched a lot of your material online, and in one of the interviews, I can't remember if it was Spectrum or Adventist Today, who are fantastic independent organizations, aren't they? The amount of material they broach is just incredible. So I really appreciate what Seibold and Alexander are doing.
Yeah.
So I'll just bring up onto the screen, in one of these interviews, you just mentioned a couple of books that I'm just interested in your thoughts. So first up, I'll just bring up one last time yours. These are we're about to just bring up some books that I think are important to look at. So we've got that one, Ellen White and the Historians by Donald R. McAdams, my guest today. Go
Yeah.
and buy a copy. I then am interested in your thoughts on this one, and this is Dr. Denny Fortin, Steps to Christ, the annotated edition. So if you just give me a brief little synopsis,
Well, let me
what you
say,
think about these books. and then we'll
There's
fair talk
an
tonight.
article in a fairly recent Spectrum where I've laid out my list, and I might give you a little background on that.
Yeah.
The Association of SDA Historians has been around since the 70s, 1970s. In fact, I was the first president of that organization.
Mm.
And I was invited by Terry Amont, who is one of our authors and who is a professor at Walla Walla, to present a paper to a meeting of the association that was held in the Rosario Beach, the Marine station for Walla Walla College, back about a year ago, I guess, September of maybe yeah, of 24, I think. Anyway, yeah. So she said, I want you to come in and present a paper. And I said, on what topic? She said, anything you want. Probably something to do with Ellen White, since that's something you know something about. So I wrote a paper that I presented at that at that conference. And the editor of Spectrum was in the audience, and he came up afterwards and said that they would like to publish it. So it's in a recent Spectrum, and it's called Where Have Historians Taken the Church? That's the title of the article.
Right. Okay.
And I can recommend that to your readers. I think you
Yes.
can probably get it online. And the run up to that was that Ben MacArthur, who was another student of mine at Andrews and had a distinguished career at Southern Adventist University, had written an article for Spectrum back in 1979 saying, where are historians taking the church? And he had
Right.
thrown out this caution that the study of Ellen White could undermine and in very serious ways have a negative impact on the church downstream. He was saying it's inevitable. I mean, that's what historians do. They go back and look at the facts,
Yeah.
and we may find things we wish we didn't know. Sort of basically what he's saying. So I decided to write. I decided to write an article, but taking Ben's sort of prophecy and looking at what's happened over the last almost 50 years. And I concluded that the revisionist historians really have taken the church somewhere.
Yeah.
And that it's a good thing they did, and that it didn't turn out to be as negative as Ben thought it might.
Right.
And so in the process of that article, I made a list of who I considered to be the significant revisionist historians on Ellen White. Now, let me make a point that's important. There are other scholars that have done enormously interesting stuff on Ellen White that I haven't included because I don't consider them revisionist.
Right.
In other words, let's take the Ellen White Encyclopedia, which is a massive volume full of information that we never knew and very interesting. But it is supportive of traditional beliefs.
Yeah.
And there have been no end of seminary students who've written doctoral dissertations on Ellen White. There have been articles in the Ministry magazine that have brought out new things we didn't know about her, but they've all fallen into the category of being supportive. That is, they haven't done anything to undermine what has traditionally been believed about her gift. Right. So I'm defining revisionist historians as those who've uncovered and published in a book. I didn't count articles.
Yeah.
There are some, I took the books, historians who have published books that have laid out evidence which undermines belief in our traditional views. I don't say that undermines belief in her inspiration or undermines belief in her gift, but it undermines what we believed in the 1950s during that wonderful World of Ellen White era, where she was an authority and original and all that.
Yes.
And so then there's this list, right? And Denny's book is on that list.
Can you just one more time give me the title of the Spectrum article? I'll just search while you.
It's called Where Have Historians Taken the Church?
And if you just share a bit about the Denny 14 one.
Well, the significance of this book is that he shows the work of Marion Davis.
Yes.
That's the significance. again, her role in developing this book was so significant that you could almost call her a co-author. Certainly, if not a co-author, assisted by. You know,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
our famous athletes and politicians write books that and have a ghostwriter, it'll say, uh, Hillary Clinton assisted by, or Lance Armstrong with somebody else. Her role is so important in this book that she really should have been on the title page,
yeah,
with some acknowledgement. And that is undermines the traditional view,
yeah,
because the traditional view is that Ellen White was a master stylist and a beautiful writer, and that this book is just flows and is a wonderful book, which it is. Um, it's a wonderful devotional book, uh, and Marion Davis deserves a lot of credit for it.
yes, yes.
Okay,
Okay, I'll just bring just two or three other quick ones, and they're a part of this.
yeah, they're
Uh,
on my list of what I consider revisionist historian. By
yeah,
the way, there's some people probably wish they were on the list and aren't, and others that are really unhappy that they are on the list. But anyway,
is that the article? Just is that the one
that's
you?
it.
Yeah,
It's in that issue. Yeah,
yeah. So volume 53, issue
yeah,
3, everyone, if you want to check that
yeah.
out. And
I think it's interesting. I think it's a very interesting article.
yeah, um, this one, I think, yes. So Gil Valentine, I think, wrote this one. Just a couple of quick thoughts on this.
Ah, yes.
Prophet and the Presidents.
Well, Gil, who's an amazing historian, the way he
Mm,
churns out stuff, good stuff, really good stuff. Um, he really does his best to put this in a very positive light. But the facts are, when you read the book, it's pretty clear that she's in Australia, and she does not like the way some of the church leaders are doing things, and she is interacting with the presidents, three of them during this period. And today we would call it micromanaging,
right.
meddling. Uh, she was sometimes being critical in ways that were not deserved.
Mm,
I mean, she was really going after, for example, the General Conference president for things going on at the review. Well,
mm,
the General Conference had no control over the review. It was a private corporation owned by
right.
shareholders, you know.
Right.
Uh, you see a side of her that is, I would say, not flattering.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't intend for it to be non-flattering. He does a really good job of showing how that this is the apostolic gift and the spiritual, the gift of prophecy and the gift of apostleship,
Yeah.
interacting and working their way through things. But when you read it, you see that she's really she's getting a lot of information from people in Battle Creek who are writing her letters, complaining about things, and she's turning around and believing them and hammering the General Conference president. And what I would like to see is, I would like to see if the White Estate has all the letters that were being written to her during that period of time, who was writing the letters to her and what were they saying. And
Yeah.
I'll bet if those letters exist, I think you could, really put that together with Gil's book, and it would be even more interesting. But
And
I don't know
he,
if those letters exist.
yeah, wow. There's a bit of research we can offer people to try attempt. Now,
Yeah,
this George Knight's at the center of a lot of these
yeah.
authors getting published. Tell us a bit about his series and
Well, George is the most significant historian of Adventism, period.
yeah,
There's never been anyone like him, probably never will be anyone like him. He not only has written who knows how many books, 20. I mean, I can't count them.
he's the most
Uh,
published Adventist author on the planet.
yeah, he's also stimulated an interest in Adventist history. He was Gill's mentor, and he basically was behind, I think, the SDA, the Ellen White Encyclopedia.
Mm,
I think he was definitely behind the Pioneer series, uh, and several of the books on my list are books in the Pioneer series, um, because they're biographies of prominent 19th century leaders who interacted a lot with Ellen White. And this book is really interesting and important because he focuses, it's a catchy title, Ellen White's Afterlife, it's showing how the church in the years after her death built her up even higher than she had been in her lifetime. I mean, she made some claims that I don't think could be supported, but a lot of claims were made about her later on that were really over the top.
Yeah. And just and there's other books, of course, by lots of different authors. I'll finish on this one. I had a few others, but if people go and read that article, they'll get a full list. The
Yeah,
Spectrum
they'll get the full list, and they'll also see
volume
how they
53.
fit in and how, you know.
That's an important. I'm glad you raised that Spectrum issue, volume 53, issue 3. Now, this one I think is a hugely important work. Just I've got one more question after this, but I think I've heard you say that because this is a Ron Numbers book, Ellen Harmon White, American Prophet,
Yes,
and you've spoken
this is
highly of this book. Yeah,
this is a magnificent book.
yeah.
This is a magnificent book. I had nothing to do with it. I just read it, and well, I was invited to the conference in Portland where they reviewed the papers. I'd had a chance to see it in process of being developed. Ronnie had enormous influence in and out of the Adventist Church.
Yes.
And he helped recruit. In fact, he probably did all of the recruiting. I don't know. Non-Adventist scholars who were specialists in 19th century American religious history. Major professors at Duke and Chicago and other places. And so he brings together Adventist scholars and non-Adventist scholars to study Ellen White. And they all write papers and critique each other's work. And he, along with Gary Land and Terry Amont, do an enormous amount of work to bring all this together. And the book is amazing because it covers Ellen White's life really amazingly thoroughly. I mean, there's a chapter by John Butler. There's one by Eric Anderson. The chapters cover everything about her, from her private life to her public life to the Civil War to, everything. There's even an article about her burial and funeral and all this, and there's stuff in there that you never knew that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And the point I made about this book is that if I was teaching a course in an Adventist college on Ellen White, this is the one book I would assign, because it would give the student a broad view, many different viewpoints, dealing with all kinds of issues that you wouldn't ordinarily think of. And you see the comprehensive person, and you really see her in her time and place. And it's definitely revisionist.
Yeah. When you guys wrote this book, did you think about calling it Revising the Prophet instead of Reclaiming the Prophet?
No. We kicked around various titles, but the reclaiming was currently we had the feeling that she's just being lost to the church. The pastors are ignoring her. Just nobody talks about her. You ask young Adventists, it's sort of, what do you think about Ellen White? You'll get who's Ellen White, And we thought, before the church loses her completely, a lot of these traditionalists or old folks, whether the next generation is going to buy into all this is hard to know.
There's a young generation coming up.
So we wanted to use the word reclaiming.
There's a young generation coming up that are very Ellen White focused, and the people that are behind those movements are presenting as if they're progressive, but they are really very, very, you can follow their legacy through Laurie Torres back to the Standish brothers, and they're coming across as hip and fun, and but the material, and it's very popular. Young people are either just cultural Adventists that love haystacks and Happy Sabbath and potluck and worship music, or there's a big movement now that's growing into the whole traditional Adventist view of Ellen White.
How are these people?
Sad to
How are
see.
these people? How are these people going to handle the evidence?
Well,
Will they be aware of it? Will they be aware of the evidence?
Yeah, that's why I'm glad that you've announced here that it's coming out, because they need to read that kind of material. But what you've also said is that a lot of I've claimed this, that a lot of pastors, for example, won't come on this show or any social media platform to even discuss this stuff. So they're not sharing the material because they are scared of losing their jobs. And young pastors have lost their jobs simply by coming on shows like mine.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
I'm sure.
I think you guys are the last hope of Adventism. And I want to ask you a fun last question
Okay.
that someone has messaged me. They want you to create a prompt for what you would ask AI about the Jerome topic we discussed earlier. And I think some people will watch this and go and ask chat their AI platform. So you were saying that
Well, if you
the
if you
Jerome
could
thing
get
needs
it,
to be
if you
discussed.
could get a hold of a transcription of the Jerome manuscript,
Yeah.
not cursive, because that's hard to read.
So you're saying there's not even a transcription out there that you've seen?
There's no. I understand that there are a few scholars that actually have transcribed it,
Right.
but they haven't done the comparison work.
Right.
And if they've done some of the comparison work, they've not told anybody.
Okay.
If you had a transcription of the Jerome manuscript and you entered it all in and asked AI to identify sources for that, I bet AI could
Yeah.
identify sources for almost every paragraph.
Wow. Well, there's a challenge for those watching. I think Kevin Morgan, who is an Ellen White apologist.
I think he might have transcribed
Yeah.
some some portions of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Ron Graybill has transcribed some portions of it, maybe
Yeah.
all of it. And someone needs to actually lay it out with sources and great controversy and show the dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'll
But
even
by the
ask
way, for your viewers, no one needs to wait for that. Pick your favorite Ellen White book, find a paragraph or a page that you like, type it into Chat GPT or Claude or whoever,
yeah.
and say, what are this is from, tell the AI the source. This is the book. I'm citing this passage from this book, this page number. Identify any sources you can from printed material.
Great.
And yeah, I mean, you could do that.
We don't have to wait for the Jerome.
You could do that. You could do that tomorrow. You could do it this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
See what you get.
That's great. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Don. I appreciate so much that you've been on. I hope you'll come back. Hope I haven't scared you away, because there's so much information that you have that I'm hoping to get. Well, he has agreed. Warren Trenchard's going to come back and talk about his. What did he say about the investigative judgment? He did a AT topic on it.
Yeah.
The IJ something or something. I can't remember what it was called. And we're going to do a shorter one. And this has been a kind of an introduction to Don McAdams.
Well, I've just started another book. I read one right after the next, and I've just started a big fat book on the global history of the 7 Years' War. So that's where my attention is going to be for the next week or two.
Yeah, well, that's great.
So.
Yeah. Well, look, I know it's late there for you. You must be.
It is late. Yeah.
Getting around midnight, would it be?
Yeah, it's 11:15 here, so
11:15.
I need to go to bed. I'm an old man. I need my sleep.
Do you mind me asking how old you are?
85.
85. Wow. Well, you're doing really well. My dad's 93. He was lecturing up in the late 60s and 70s at Avondale, and he knows all the players as well, but he's doing well, 93. So you got plenty of time yet.
That's amazing. Yeah. Great.
Well, thank you very much. And
Thank
don't forget,
you.
shoot me that Case Bolt email, and we will catch you again. Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you. It's
watching.
been a pleasure.
We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
See you.